Hello, I'm State Representative Janine Nodder, and on this episode of Chattin' with Janine, I've invited Representative Keith Ammon to come talk to us about things I don't know much about. Sound money, which includes fiduciary money, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, blockchain. You may have heard those words before. What do they mean? Well, let's find out. Welcome, Keith.
Welcome, Janine. Thank you for having me on the show.
You know, we were on the same committee 10 years ago.
Yeah, we've known each other for a long time.
Yep.
I remember you sat across from me and we used to make faces at each other when
Yes.
somebody was saying something we thought was not smart.
There's still people that do that, try to make eye contact to see if we can lose. It's like, you got to get that poker face going.
That's right.
But thanks for coming on to the show. Let's start with House Bill 302, because that's recently been in the press. The governor signed it into law. It was you and our majority leader, Jason Osborne.
Yep, and a few other people.
Yeah. I only saw the picture with the governor, you and Jason.
Yeah, so I'll tell you the backstory to that if you want. My phone is ringing here. I don't know why that's my wife calling me for some reason. I hope everything's okay at home. I'll have to check on it. It was a funny situation because similar bills were in other states. And so just House Bill 302, the idea is that the state treasurer has a very limited list of assets that she can invest in, and this would add gold and digital assets to the list. So, and we can get into it if you want, that both of those tend to beat inflation. The list of things that she was approved to invest in do not beat inflation. So if you park your money into those things, you're going to lose the value of your dollar over time. So that's kind of the short version of it. But other states had similar bills, and we knew that Arizona was about to sign theirs, so we were scrambling to be first.
Okay.
And now we've made history. We're the first state to add it to allow our treasurer to do it. And it made a bunch of news across the country and different news programs, different business programs, and a lot of people were talking about New Hampshire. They weren't expecting us to kind of be the dark horse and come out and be first.
Oh, so, I wonder how Arizona feels about all that.
Well, so people were mad. So the governor in Arizona had a bill. They had a couple versions of the bill. One of them, the governor vetoed it, and everyone was upset with their governor for doing it, the people that are interested in this. And then Kelly Ayotte signed ours, and now they were really mad they lost their first place opportunity. You know, you only get to make history once. Mm-hmm. And and so that's kind of an interesting thing, that digital assets are becoming...
Digital assets.
Yeah, digital assets is sort of like the generic term for virtual currencies, cryptocurrencies, blockchain tokens. There's lots of different things that are considered digital assets.
And I just read an article by Patrick Hines talking about this. So digital assets means there's transactions taking place where you never see the money. It's all digital. Is that right?
It's all digital. And it usually flows over a blockchain, which we can get into what a blockchain is.
Yes, what is a blockchain?
Well, okay, you want to jump right into it. All right.
Yes.
All right, so a blockchain is basically a data structure. So like you've heard of databases.
Yes.
The simplest way to think about it is it's a ledger, like a spreadsheet. So think of a spreadsheet. It's got columns and rows. And if it records transactions in your spreadsheet, like every time somebody gives someone else a few coins or money or something, it changes hands. The ledger keeps track of who has it, who owns it. That's a really simple version of it.
Okay.
And then layered on top of that are this idea of decentralization. So if you have one master copy of the ledger, then somebody might be able to change the entries in the ledger, basically, right? So, you know, a centralized ledger is bad because it gives one group or one person the ability to control it. And so what blockchain does is it takes that ledger and it copies it thousands or millions of times all around the world. And so these servers, they're called nodes in the blockchain space. It's like a server, a computer somewhere, connected to the internet, receives a copy of that ledger. So if you shut some of the nodes down, you can't kill the ledger because it still exists a whole bunch of other places. So that's the idea of decentralization.
All right, now a data center. Would a data center hold all the blockchain information?
It depends on which blockchain you're talking about. The idea with so Bitcoin was the very, very first, and we can get into like it solved some interesting computer science problems that had not been solved before. So there's a lot more to it than just the ledger. I'm just kind of giving you the building blocks.
Well, I want people who don't know anything about this to understand
to
what
understand.
we're talking about.
But everybody knows what a spreadsheet looks like, right?
Yes,
You know what your
spreadsheet,
you know what your
that's
checkbook looks like when you keep track of entries and you know what you spent. Like that's what a ledger is, right? And so that's in its simplest form. There's a whole lot of other layers to it, and then the fact that it's copied thousands or millions of times all around the world, and those copies are kept in sync. And that's really the key thing, is you can't have the ledgers diverging on whose transactions are true and whose transactions are false. So the question is, how do you keep those ledgers in sync? Thousands of copies of them. And there's a mechanism, it's called the consensus mechanism. And that's kind of the secret sauce of like Bitcoin or these other protocols, is how do they maintain consensus all around the world? These people don't know each other. They just happen to have a computer on a protocol. A protocol is like a language. It's like a set of rules for a language. So email is a protocol. So when you send an email, as long as who you're sending it to runs the same email protocol, it might be on a different server. Like you might be running Windows, they're on Apple, or the server's running Linux, right? They can all talk to each other because they agree on the rules of the language that they're talking to each other. That's what a protocol is, right?
Interesting. And
so this network that keeps these ledgers in sync, they all agree on the same language, the same protocol. And there's we can get into the layers of it, but there's some interesting ways that they keep everyone in agreement, even though they don't know each other. They don't really talk to each other. They might not even like each other. It could be, two nodes. One node could be in a country at war with another country, and those nodes are still cooperating through the internet, right?
But it's all dependent on energy, right? Because if you don't have electricity.
Yeah, well, computers run on energy, it turns out, right? You need electrons to compute with.
So can all this work with solar wind power?
Yeah, actually, we can get into that.
Intermittently.
Yeah, so it's really good at running intermittently, it turns out.
Interesting.
Yeah, so there's different consensus mechanisms. The very first one, which is Bitcoin's the original. The OG stands for original gangster, right? That's if you hear someone say OG.
Yes, I do. I hear people
original
say
gangster.
that.
So Bitcoin in 2008, this anonymous person on the internet. It's almost like a Spider-Man origin story. There was a mailing list called the cypherpunks, mainly out in California, and cryptography had just been invented, sort of. Not computer cryptography was becoming like a real thing. It was like uncrackable. There was a point where the government shut down. There was a guy named Phil Zimmern who invented PGP, which stands for Pretty Good Privacy, and so this is all about encryption. So you've heard of cryptocurrency. Crypto is cryptography. That's what crypto stands for.
Oh, okay.
So, there was a community of like hackers online in the late 80s, early 90s, somewhere in that time frame, who were all communicating about what you could do with cryptography, all the things that you could do with cryptography. And they focused on individual sovereignty, that you could use cryptography to maintain your individual sovereignty, your privacy, your ability to communicate with people without someone spying on you or hacking you, right? So that was sort of like the ethos in this mailing list, which at the time it was just like a forum on the internet. And this anonymous person who went by Satoshi Nakamoto, have you ever heard Satoshi Nakamoto?
No, can't say that I have.
Okay, well that's the big deal. It was a person or a group of people who came up with the idea for Bitcoin. And they were using older ideas, they were putting pieces of the puzzle together. And that's the real innovation, is the way that they took existing technologies and sort of put them together in like building blocks to create the first blockchain. And nobody still knows who that person or group of people is.
Was it you?
No, it was not me. It wasn't me. And there's been documentaries about it, like Newsweek, I think in 2014. I'm pretty sure that's the right year. Newsweek came out with like, oh, we found out who Satoshi Nakamoto was, and it was some guy in California, Japanese guy that liked to collect trains, and they made a big headline story about it on the front page of their magazine. It turns out it was just some guy that they had nothing to do with it, right? So, so there's still.
When I hear Bitcoin, for some reason I always think of pieces of 8, like a bit of coin.
Oh, well.
Because like Pirate Days, pieces of 8.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's what I always
I've never heard
think
that
of.
related before. That's cool.
Yeah. And then somebody gave us a book. I don't know if you got it it was on Bitcoin. And blockchain.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly which one, but there's...
It was years ago.
Yeah.
It was like, I want to say it was 10 years ago, because Josh Moore still lived in town, and I actually gave him the book, because he was very excited to get it. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Okay, enjoy.
So, you don't have to be a super nerd to understand it, but the idea is in computer science and computers, the data that you send can be changed and copied, and like I'll just start with some basic ideas, right? So you have a picture of your grandkids and you attach that picture, it's a digital picture, you attach it to an email and you send it to your husband or your daughter, whoever it is. Now there's 2 copies of that picture, right? You still have it in your sent box, and who you send it to has a copy. And then they can send it to 5 or 10 people, right? That digital information can be copied and duplicated and replicated. And so there's no scarcity to the picture. It could be copied a million times, right? Like,
Okay.
So
I get that.
So when you're dealing with money, you can't do that. You can't, if I give you $1, I can't still have the same dollar and now there's $2, right? Like it needs to, the value needs to transfer from one person to the next. And that's what the blockchain concept had invented. It had never really been, I mean, you could use a centralized database to do that, but the fact that this is a decentralized network where nobody's in charge. All the nodes that talk to each other are all equals in the network, and anybody can join the network and no one can stop you from joining the network. So there's no gatekeeper, there's no centralized control.
And how is it safe?
Safe in what way?
Keep people out. I don't know how to word it.
Yeah, I mean it's safe in as much as it's had a 16-year history with now it's a $2 trillion bounty on cracking the code, and no one's been able to crack it in 16 years. So as far as like safety of the system itself, it is probably one of the most secure networks on the planet. And the key thing to understand is all the code is open source. It means anybody can read the code. There's no secrets. It's all open. So if you wanted to try to hack it, you would be able to read every line of code and figure out a way to break it. And no one's been able to do that in 16 years.
So now that 302 is signed,
yeah.
What is the governor going to do with this? You'd mentioned at the beginning of the show that gold and silver.
Yeah, so it includes gold and silver, right? Mm-hmm. So it gives the treasurer, like I said, some more tools in the toolbox. So I think what will happen is the treasurer will learn about it. I think the idea will be more obvious over time. And that has to do with the nature of the current monetary system. And so the treasurer will learn about it, and most likely will use like an ETF product, which is...
ETF.
Yeah, so Fidelity and BlackRock are the 2 biggest ones. And
Fidelity's right here in Merrimack.
Yeah, right. So Fidelity has the 2nd largest Bitcoin ETF.
Really?
Yeah, wow. so they buy the Bitcoin, they store it for you securely, and then they issue shares of the ETF, and you can just buy it through your like...
Is it a physical thing? You said
I just made, that was a gesture, but no, it's all digital.
I was going to say. Yeah, okay, so they store electronically.
They store electronically,
okay.
Yeah.
So would that be considered a data center then?
I mean, you can store it with just like a seed phrase. Like you can remember 12 words in your head, and that's storing Bitcoin as long as you know those words. So there's different ways to store it. They'll probably use an institutional custodian, and I mean, I don't know. Like, there's some big ones out there where they trust someone who's like a company that's expert at storing it. They'll create an agreement with them to store it. But it's just keys. I mean, it boils down to like a really big password. That's really what storing it means. It's not physical space. Mm-hmm. It's not even like, you don't need a big computer to store it either, because what you're storing is keys that prove that you own a certain amount of tokens on the network. So you don't actually take possession of the tokens themselves. They still live on the network, but you take possession of the proof of ownership of those tokens.
And it's considered currency?
That's the very first use case for it, is the currency, because you need those computers to run all around the world, right? So I call them nodes. That's what they're called. Mm-hmm. So the node is trying to figure out the next block on the blockchain. So there's a puzzle that they're all trying to solve. And the one somewhere in the world will solve the puzzle and will announce the solution to the rest of the network. And that secures a set of transactions into the blockchain. So think of like blocks chained together. That's kind of what it's like. Each block is like a spreadsheet, and they're chained together and cryptographically. And so when a node finds the solution to the next block, it gets a reward. And the reward is brand new Bitcoin that haven't existed before. So with our US dollar, like the Federal Reserve can get into a boardroom and they can make new money. And then, there's whole kinds of issues with that. But within the Bitcoin ecosystem, the new money is randomly rewarded to some node somewhere on the blockchain. And that's how new Bitcoin comes into existence. And that incentivizes whoever's running that node to buy the hardware, rent the space, and buy the electricity that the hardware needs to run. So the whole point of the tokens is to incentivize the running of the nodes. So it's like a self-reinforcing system.
Yeah, I wish I had remembered to bring that Patrick Hines article with me, because I'm trying to remember what he said about something from the past that was new and now is part of the internet.
That was how he closed his article. That the
so
80s.
This is the future.
Yeah. So the late 80s, early 90s, we had the internet. Like, the government was using it, but the wider economy didn't know what it was. People were talking about it and not really understanding how big of a deal it was.
Like, even email was like still a new thing in 1990.
Yeah, why do we need email when we have just regular mail? We can put a stamp on it and send it. Like people were saying stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, why do we need this currency when we have our old currency? Like, it works just fine.
So do you think that like coins and dollars, actual physical dollars, are going to be phased out?
Well, the government's kind of doing that on its own. So we talked about sound money. Okay, mm-hmm. So the US dollar used to be backed by gold. It used to be a receipt for gold deposited in a bank. It was like a token mm-hmm. for actual things in a vault, right? And then especially like in 71, when Nixon closed the gold window, you couldn't. This is a big deal. So 1971 was like 6 months before I was born. President Nixon said these other countries wanted their gold back. They wanted their gold stored in the U.S. And Nixon said, we're not going to let you exchange your dollars for the gold that you thought you had owned. So it depegged the dollar from actual physical gold. So now the dollar is just a number in a database somewhere, and they can just add zeros to the database, and that's how they can make new money. It's basically that simple, right?
I did a show on sound money, I think it was 2007, and I remember we were talking about that, and the guest wanted to go back to gold.
The gold
standard. But you just paying for things in gold, actual gold. And he goes, yes, it's heavy.
It doesn't really work in the modern economy, right? Because you can't teleport gold across the planet through the internet, right? So Bitcoin was designed to model gold. It's got the rules around Bitcoin are similar to the rules around how gold comes into the economy. And so to get new gold into the economy, you have to go mine it, right? You need big, heavy equipment. You need to dig up the earth. You need to process the gravel. I don't know if you've ever seen Gold Rush, the show. You never seen Gold Rush?
Oh, maybe.
Yeah. So it's like about Alaska. There's claims they.
Yeah. Well, there was a show in California too called California Gold that I used to watch.
Oh, okay, yeah. But if you just have some idea of like gold takes a lot of energy to find it and to refine it, and that's a limiting factor on new gold coming into the economy, right? There's an energy requirement and an equipment requirement for this new gold to come into the economy. With U.S. dollars, there's none of that. They can just, I think like a quarter of all new dollars came into existence since COVID. Like they just flooded the economy with new dollars.
Which makes it worth less.
It makes it worth less.
Because that was from 2007, that show. We talked about like diamonds. If diamonds were as plentiful as the grains of sand on the beach, what would they be worth?
Exactly.
Nothing.
Right. Scarcity is important. Mm-hmm. So like if I was selling you milk, whole milk, and I kept putting a little water in it every time you bought some milk from me, right? And eventually it's just water. Not as nutritious, right? So it's like the same thing with the dollar. When they print new money, not backed by anything, there's this concept of, I think of it real simply, the first spend of new money. So you have new money, it hasn't been spent yet. The first time it's spent, it's treated as if it's the same value as all the other money in the circulation. So you get like this premium. Let's say you just printed $20 in your basement and nobody could tell it was counterfeit. When you spend that $20, everyone treats it at the same value as existing $20, existing dollars. But if you keep doing that, you keep, it's like diluting the milk, right? You keep putting this new currency in, it's just paper and ink. There's no value to it. Then every time that's the first spend, somebody's stealing from everybody else. Because when that money goes into circulation, it dilutes the value of everybody else's money, right?
Interesting.
And that's unsound money.
Unsound, yeah.
Yeah.
We have about 5 minutes left.
All right.
I know you just did a show with J.P. Marzullo.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he's been on the show before here.
Yeah.
Talking about veterans issues. Was there anything that he asked you that I should have?
We just kind of talked about how the blockchain works. It's a big topic. You could spend 1,000 hours learning about it, but don't be intimidated by it. It's not that hard.
Well, if somebody wanted to learn more about it,
there's. I guess probably the best place to go is Safe House. There's a guy named Saifedean Ammous. But anyway, his website is Safe House, SAIF for safe house.
HOUSE. SAIF house. Okay.
.com. And there's a lot of books and publications on there. They're all high quality, and you can, there's simple versions and more complex versions. But that's probably the best place to go. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How did you get interested in this? I know.
I was always interested in how money works, and then I was a computer programmer and interested in cryptography. And I heard rumors that there were, like Bitcoin isn't the first try at this. There's been predecessors to Bitcoin. So I was sort of hearing about this idea of, it's really electronic cash for the internet. That's the basic version of it.
Electronic cash for the internet.
Right.
Okay.
So when I give you $1, you now possess the dollar, and I no longer do. That's like cash. There's no middleman. There's no bank in the middle, right? I give you the dollar for something, and then now you have the dollar. So Bitcoin works that way in the virtual world, where there's no middleman really. It's just a protocol. And once I give you the Bitcoin, it's just like cash, but it's on the internet. And that was like the holy grail. Mm-hmm. And so I'd sort of been following like these different efforts, and I just got exposed to the idea back in.
And you also started the Emerging Technologies Caucus, and I signed up, so I get the emails. But the day that you guys meet is the only day that I have to do my errands, and I take a class on that morning.
No problem. Well. It's hard to coordinate 50 people's schedules, so do the best we can.
But it is very interesting. So
we cover blockchain stuff, and blockchain encompasses a lot of stuff. It's like we're talking about money, that's just the very first use case for it. There's lots of things you can do with blockchain. So just to be clear on that, if you want to go down the rabbit hole. But then we talk about advanced nuclear. We talk about, I'm interested in aerial mobility, so like drones and that kind of stuff. What else do we talk about? AI, right?
Artificial intelligence, oh, that's big.
Yeah, and we went and visited Dean Kamen's place and
yes, I want to go there.
Yeah, we saw they had organs being printed. They basically have like a machine it has a cartridge. It's like this plastic cartridge with little chambers and stuff that plugs into like the liquids and the sensors, and then it grows an organ inside that cartridge.
I know, it's fascinating.
And then they throw out the cartridge and they harvest the organ, throw out the cartridge.
Is it mostly like skin? Is that, or
we
can
saw
they
like
grow other?
I think we saw like a pancreas being grown, but it can be bone, skin. They were talking about
a new world.
They were growing lungs in a different part of the building. So yeah, that's all advanced manufacturing, tissue manufacturing. So all that stuff's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And I think my philosophy is we shouldn't be afraid of it. We should understand it, and you really can't stop progress. You could try to stand in the way of it, but it's like standing in the way of a river, right? So I think of it, these are new tools that we need to understand and grow our quality of life and prosperity by using tools to make life easier and make us smarter. So.
Wow. Well, I'm sure I'm going to have to do some more shows on this because I'm one of those people if it's something new, I've got to hear it more than once before it eventually clicks.
So you drove a car here, right? Does it have an automatic transmission? Have you ever seen inside one of those? There's all kinds of channels and liquids and balls and clutches, and it's like super complicated. But when it works right, it's real smooth. But you don't have to really you don't need to understand the inner workings of your engine or your transmission to use it. You just need to have a kind of a basic understanding of it. And so most people with Bitcoin or blockchain, they just need to have enough of an understanding that they can trust it, and then the experts will dig into the details, right? So you just have to get to that level of comfort. But it's really a new thing, and it's going to change. It's currently changing like global finance, which is kind of a cool thing. It's a big idea, really big idea. So.
Oh, that's the title of the next show.
Yeah,
Hello.
there you go.
Thank you.
Thanks,
for
Janine.
coming here and
Hopefully it was helpful.
talking to me about this. Yeah.
Cool.
And thank you, and keep it up. Keep up the good work, and thank you for watching.